Okay.
There it
Okay.
goes. Yes.
Okay. Good. Sometimes it's as though the technology has changed and it really hasn't. Okay. It's 2:05. You have joined us today for the 360-degree volunteer engagement idea exchange. And today's topic for some of us is very, I think, timely. And for others of us, it's hopefully will give us things to think about and how we do this. And it's finding advocacy volunteers and keeping them involved or getting them involved in non-advocacy efforts. So that's our topic for today. Dr. Mary, would you like to start?
I certainly will. And I just want to say welcome to everybody that's here today. We'll probably have a few more people joining. We appreciate those of you who take the time to come and contribute to these conversations of staff and volunteers. And so today's question, put it in the chat and I will also read it. It starts out by saying, do advocacy volunteers require different support than non-advocacy talent? And how do we keep advocacy volunteers involved year-round in non-advocacy efforts? Advocacy is a challenging word to say without it being a tongue twister. So once again, do advocacy volunteers require a different support than non-advocacy volunteers? And how do we keep advocacy volunteers involved year-round during non-advocacy efforts or when there aren't advocacy things that are going on? Who wants to add to that conversation or who wants to start the conversation? I'll give it a minute to settle in your minds and marinate a little bit because we know right now there's lots of stuff going on. Gloria in Florida, you want to share some of your ideas?
Yeah, it's kind of an odd question to me because most of the volunteers that I work with here in South Florida, we're advocates. We're also on the Speakers Bureau. If a need arises to do a tabling event, we do that. It's basically you learn to get involved with as many things as you can, and when the advocacy opportunities come up, you're ready for that also. So I would say volunteers kind of wear a lot of different hats.
Thank you. I agree. And Kim has put a really great centering question in the chat. And those of you who have a strong advocacy network in your states, would one of you want to describe or define who and what advocacy volunteers are for those of us in the room who may not be familiar with that? Like a Kathy Kynes or a Mark Hensley or
a J.R. Fujita.
JR. Oh, I have to go to my second screen here.
Sure. Advocacy volunteers in California play several different roles. We have local advocacy volunteers who help us on local issues, working with their city council members and county supervisors. Most of the time it's related to our livable communities work. We also work with state and federal advocacy volunteers who are helping us with our state and federal legislative priorities at state capitals, and then also supporting our federal work, such as our Social Security campaign that's going on right now. And then in California, we also have two other volunteer activities, which include our Capitol Response Team. Our volunteers go to the state capitol to testify and to provide Me Too statements when there are hearings or important votes. They're also in the state capitol making sure that elected officials on certain committees are hearing from AARP and knowing where we stand. And then we also have a policy advisor volunteer team that helps review our state bills and make recommendations for our position after doing research and consulting the AARP policy book. And so there's different levels of advocacy volunteers, and there's definitely different ways that our states and offices engage our volunteers.
Thank you. That was a great centering point for the conversation. And certainly you gave a plethora of ways that advocacy is used throughout the states. And there are different teams in different states. So this is not just a one size fits all, but JR gave you a really good overview of some of the ways that advocacy volunteers operate in the states. And JR also put in the chat that invite to other, invite to other events in their areas to stay informed and connected. And as Gloria indicated, many of the advocacy volunteers also operate in other avenues and in other areas of responsibility, wearing many hats. So anyone else want to talk about or contribute to how to keep advocacy volunteers involved year-round during non-advocacy periods? Or is there anything unique that you have going on in your state that you'd like to share? Jason, do I see your hand up?
You did. I can't find it on the Zoom interface today for some reason. I'm so used to Teams. So at least for us in Michigan, we're a little unique. We generally have a year-round legislative session. So typically keeping our advocacy volunteers engaged is not too much of a trouble because there's always something going on in the Capitol across the street. But I did want to offer some thoughts about how to support advocacy volunteers as compared to outreach volunteers. I know from my perspective working with volunteers, so in Michigan, we have a dedicated advocacy volunteer team, and then we have outreach volunteers in our target communities. You can serve on both, but more often than not, many of our advocacy volunteers are spread all across the state, as opposed to kind of centered in a particular geographic location, like our major cities. So because of that, I have found that we need to make sure that we gather as a group on a regular basis, because I have volunteers that are all the way 6-7 hours up in the Upper Peninsula, and building camaraderie among the team is important. So we meet monthly. We do a Zoom call as well. And it's an opportunity for us to not only as staff talk to volunteers about what's going on in the legislature, but it's also an opportunity for them to talk about what they are seeing in their own local communities. We really encourage our volunteers. It's great to have volunteers coming to the Capitol, coming to hearing and all that. But one of the main things that we encourage for our advocacy volunteers is that they build a relationship with their local officials. And you can do that from anywhere. You don't have to go to the Capitol. We encourage them to write their officials regularly, to call their offices, to go to coffee hours or office hours, as they're sometimes called, in their districts. And that's also an opportunity then when we meet monthly to kind of hear what the experience is, because I have found that when we have one volunteer who has gone to an office hours and has had a great experience, it then can encourage other volunteers to maybe take that step, especially if there's a little bit of hesitation in doing that. And I understand there can be some fears associated with going to meet with a state elected official for the first time. So that's what we found, at least I have found, is that gathering together on a regular basis is really important for our team to help in terms of keeping everyone motivated and engaged.
That's great. Go blue. Mark, I see your hand up, and then Josephine.
Yes, ma'am. I just want to mention, we've talked a lot about elected officials in North Carolina. Most of you know we are 5 regions, so staff are spread across the state. So we have 5 teams, but we do come together at the state capitol for Advocacy Day. But on the ground here, we talk about little A and big A. Little A advocacy is where we're encouraging a volunteer to, for example, send in a letter to the editor about an AARP issue, help a neighbor individually who's having some type of problem, say navigating, trying to call Social Security. That's little A. And then big A advocacy is when we do big group things, as was mentioned up at the General Assembly. My approach at it is every volunteer is an advocacy volunteer, because just being part of AARP, volunteering their time, supporting the mission and the vision of AARP makes you an advocate. And the last thing I'll say is, in North Carolina, it's Duke or dark. Duke Power provides our electricity. There's no other option. When they propose a rate hike, we go and take all of our folks in red shirts to one after another go up and testify what that impact of a rate hike on insurance or a rate hike on Duke Power is going to do. And most of the time we're successful in cutting that rate hike because we have empowered our folks who often get up there and say, I'm a shareholder of Duke Power and I oppose what you're proposing to do. So just wanted to mention that there's more than elected officials. Utilities is a big issue here in North Carolina.
Thank you. And that's Duke, D-U-K-E Power. That's what your power company is called?
Yes, it is.
Ah, okay.
So we typically say Duke or dark because we don't have a choice. But yeah, Duke University, Duke Gardens, the Duke family invested a lot of money, and we have Duke Power. So
Okay. Well,
thank you.
I learned something new today. Thank you so much. Josephine?
Hi, everybody. So I'm looking at the question and I'm thinking that how are advocacy volunteers different? First of all, I want to say advocacy volunteers are double advocates, right? Because double volunteers, because you're a volunteer and then you're volunteering as a voice for others. So you're a double volunteer. And how do we best support them and how do we keep them busy year round? For me, that's pretty easy. There's a lot of work to be done. And just like AARP is good at building relationship, I think the work of advocates is all about building relationships. That's something that needs to be happening year round, right? And so we're talking about training, we're talking about preparation. We know that the legislative setting is very hectic and can be very intimidating. We know it goes really fast. And so, training for how do you get that 5-minute spiel down, right? How do you do your elevator speech? That kind of stuff. So there's plenty of stuff to be doing year round. And it's not just meeting with your legislators. It's meeting with the staff. It's meeting in what's called interim. That's the time that legislators are not at the legislature. That's the time when everybody's getting ready. Everybody's getting those, issues together. They're messaging together. They're meeting in community. So get familiar with your legislators' offices, right? And how we best support our advocates is to prepare them for those type of activities, encourage them. Encourage them to visit your legislator's office, to become familiar with them and their staff, to become familiar with the legislative setting. There's so much training that could be done year round, so many opportunities to tag along, right? To get to know the process. There's just so much to be done. But the advocates for legislative settings do require a little more support. And that support comes in terms of training, communication, maintaining our communication open, and ensuring that our advocates are well prepared and feel supported and know where to turn to at any moment's notice for good information. So that's what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Very comprehensive description. And as you can see, each description of advocacy work is it varies a little bit differently, and we know that, and we appreciate that about each state. So thank you so much for contributing. Barbara, what is going on in Connecticut?
Oh, hi, Mary. I hope you enjoyed your visit recently. I
I
love
did.
Carolyn's pictures. You get immune to the art that's around you all the time. To have it highlighted was so nice. Well, Connecticut is a small state, and that's an advantage for us as volunteers because it's not that difficult to get to our state capital when the legislature is in session. Um, we've recently embraced the idea that advocacy volunteers are also those who go out and do workshops. Whenever I'm doing a caregiving workshop, I make sure we mention, oh, we just had this success, in the legislature, or a fraud presentation. Oh, we just passed this crypto bill. So it's really a part of everything that we do. We do have, I think, 3 times a year meetings where we do a preview of what's going on in the legislature for this coming session. We meet halfway through to see where we're at. We remind all volunteers that advocacy doesn't have to be so scary. You don't have to be the one testifying. You don't have to be the one encountering your legislator all the time, but just show up. Wear your red shirt, be there, and be counted. That is often what we need. We have, legislators come up to us and say, oh, the red shirts are in the building. What's going on? What are you working for? So just even being there is important as an advocacy volunteer. What I've been working on, and I'm hopefully I'm successful, I know others have been in the past as well, is I've been hammering my state representative, gee, I really would like you to co-sponsor a fraud watch workshop in our district. Can you do that? And he said, well, contact me after the legislative session. I'll be happy to do that. I've been doing this for a few years now, that now the legislators come to me when I'm in the building. Hey, Barbara, what are you doing here today? So the familiarity, I think, makes a difference. We also have program through our Connecticut Public Radio, where it's called, or TV, which is called In the Room, where they will invite important elected officials to give a talk back. We've had everyone from the governor, the lieutenant governor. I'm going next week or the week after to our my local Congresswoman Deloro's open talk, where we go in and we can ask questions. And I've had the lieutenant governor, when she saw 4 or 5 AARP volunteers, says, well, we have some very smart AARP volunteers here in the room, very smart women. So we get the shout out as well. The person who does the commenting, John Dankowski, who does a lot of, he does, I think, Science Fridays too, on public radio. And he said, uh-oh, AARP's in the room. What are they here for today? So, just being there somehow can be enough. And we have great staff who trains us. When we have lobby days, we may in the legislative cafeteria, and either John or Natalie will say, oh, we want this bill today. And this will give us a 1-pager on it. And we come up with our elevator speech and, take one little piece out of it that we can press when we encounter a legislator. So I think we're pretty well trained. We try to get out there in the community. And again, just being there is just so important. And as I said, I think everything we do, we're advocating. And, we try to embrace it in everything else that we do.
Thanks, Barb. And you said something really powerful that it hit me differently today, and especially because I don't consider myself to be on the advocacy team. And Mark said it, he said it in a different way, but you said it in a way that really resonated with me. When we show up with our red shirts on, we are advocating even without saying a word. And to me, that felt a little bit more powerful today because in my role, and I usually do workshops and presentations on prepare to care or the downsizing or financial literacy. I always felt afraid to step into the advocacy space, and I have shown up um, at the state capitol, and I was there during our caregiving um, conversations, but I never felt that I was on the advocacy team. So you made me even rethink the way that I feel about my role as a volunteer. So thank you. I'm a little emotional, actually. So thank you for that. Also, I just want to say, and thank you, Mark, for, kind of letting us know that we are all, the big A and the little A advocate. We are all leaders as volunteers and as staff. And so that kind of plays into that leadership role that we talk about a lot as well. So thank you all. I'm just really amazed at this conversation for several reasons, but today, as I was just looking at where everyone is from, we have not only all four corners of the contiguous US covered, but we have Alaska and Hawaii here. There's someone here from Washington State, from New England, Connecticut, New Hampshire, Vermont. We have Texas, Arizona, we have Florida, and everywhere in between. And I just want to say, where else could you spend 50 minutes with people who are like-minded, who share freely all this information that make us better at what we're doing? And so I just want to give each one of you my own gratitude, a round of applause, and just say thank you for spending time with us in 360 today and every month that you have an opportunity to show up. So thank you so much. I'm
Okay.
stepping off my soapbox. Deborah, did you want to say something?
Well, it was pointed out to me that sometimes notes don't actually get into chat in the right way. So I went back, so for those of you who may not have been able to get to what it was trying to include, there is a document that I think it kind of summarizes a lot of the things that people have said here. And if you look at it, you can take it and use it with other people, but it's called Building Highly Effective Advocacy Muscle in Community in 7 Steps. And I know it's not always that easy, but the things that we're talking about here, point 1 was integrating advocacy into everything that you do in your community. And that's bringing it up when, as someone said, when you're making a presentation about caregiving, the advocacy that can go on, in terms of building community awareness. Letting all of your volunteers have a role in that. I'm kind of had the experience of some experiences of Mary. I'm not the kind of person who gets out there and routinely talks to people, legislators, or even gets on a soapbox talking about the laws that I think are important. It's something I've had to learn, but I've had to also learn it because I learned it from other people and other volunteers in my state. And the reason I keep bringing up this subject is every time I do a new volunteer orientation, probably half of the people come in and say, oh, I'm not advocacy. I don't really want to do advocacy. And so it becomes important to me and to the organization that everyone, as Mark was saying, understands that their role is advocacy in one way or another. So this document has some nice updates and some nice information and some ways to do it. It's not everyone's cup of tea, but there are ways to talk about the kinds of things about which you are passionate. So
And
thank you
Deborah, is
very
that the
much.
document that you put in the OneDrive?
Yes,
It
and it's
doesn't,
also,
it
that
doesn't come
OneDrive
up.
doesn't come up,
Yeah.
but did the other one come up now? Where it says advocacy muscle?
Yes, it's there.
Okay,
Yes, I see it. Yes.
okay, so now
You have to
skip
download
the,
it. You have to
yeah,
download it to your PC.
yeah,
Okay.
and I'm gonna put it out later when we do the recordings as well, to make sure that everybody has it if you want it. And there are some other things that can go along with that as well. So thank you. That was my soapbox.
Thank you. I see Kathy has her hand up.
And that's where I was going next. Miss Kathy?
Thank you so much. So I'm the ASD for advocacy in Washington State, and I just really thank Josephine Negroni for what she said, because she was spot on in terms of, opportunities. And all of you, I'm listening to this conversation. This is great, because one of the challenges we've had in Washington State is we have volunteers that think that they're community outreach and doing Speakers Bureau, and then the volunteers that think they're advocacy. But what I keep trying to tell people, that's all intertwined together. And so people think advocates, and they think somebody that's, carrying a sign, walking into a legislator's office, demanding change. But advocacy is writing an email. Advocacy is writing a letter. Advocacy is, clicking like on a social media piece of content from AARP. Right. All of those things are advocacy. And what I have found that works really well with a lot of our volunteers is, I call it the easy on-ramp, is to identify the things that they feel comfortable with. And sometimes it's just, signing in support at during one of the legislative sessions during a bill hearing. And all of a sudden they realize, wow, that was easy to do. And I also have something to say about this topic. So I'm like, you can actually write a letter to the legislator and the committee chair. And I help them do that. Then they're like, wow, that was easy. And then all of a sudden they're like, I'd like to call and follow up with my letter. And I'm like, absolutely, and so we work through them through a sequence of engagement levels. And then now, that volunteer is one of our lead volunteers in actually mobilizing other volunteers. So they've gone from, somebody that didn't want to even get really engaged and didn't have a true understanding of advocacy. And what I had heard from them was, I don't want to be sitting and talking to a legislator. I don't feel comfortable, or I don't feel comfortable going to a member of Congress's office. Like, what am I going to say? But then the slow baby steps and meeting people where they're at. And really that everybody has a story to tell, and they have some connection to a lot of the policy work that AARP does. And if they don't, they have a neighbor, a friend, or a family member. And being an advocate is also getting the permission from that person to tell their story too. So that's just something else that I have thought and I've utilized to kind of continue to bring people along when we're not in legislative session, when we're not necessarily, right now we're heavily involved in a lot of federal pieces of legislation, and tracking the reconciliation budget and everything else. So there's ample opportunity for engagement.
Right. Thank you, Kathy. Mary, I see your hand.
Yeah, sorry, I can't find the hand on my Zoom, but I agree with what everybody's saying, and I know one thing that we do is every year we have a legislative lunch. And at the legislative lunch, it's just not the people working, we call it Capital City Task Force, that is putting this on. We ask volunteers from across the various sections of AARP, be they in community, be they part of the Speakers Bureau. And everybody has a different role, whether it's setting up or helping to register people or just talking to the legislatures. But it's a good way for somebody who, say, is works just in community work and gets an opportunity to see what is going on at the state capitol. So I think that becomes, I mean, we've been very successful. We've had at least over 40 people, and we're all in our red, and it makes a big impact. Even if you go to a budget hearing or just a regular hearing, and you're not testifying, if you're wearing your AARP red, that makes a big impact. They look for it and they say, hey. And then the other thing I just wanted to mention, and it recently happened to me, I had a community volunteer who was talking about a hearing that I was going to, and I said, "Well, do you want to come along?" And she said, "Yeah." Well, thanks for inviting me. And I said, it just struck me because sometimes some people wait to hear what they call an invite to join them. So it's just something I think we should be cognizant of is to include everybody, and say, hey, I'm going to a budget hearing. Do you want to tag along? That type of thing.
Thank you. And some of us feel better if we just have that kind of extended hand. And so thank you for putting that out there as part of the discussion, Mary. I see Joe and then Ashley. Joe?
Yeah.
Hi, I'm from Minnesota, and I was wondering if Kathy from Washington State, it sounds like we're somewhat similar to Washington State. We do have a separate advocacy team. And what my role is, I'm what's called a portal champion, but my role is more onboarding, recruiting. I work with Erin Thyman. She's my staff partner. I'm the volunteer. So we're really looking this year, how do we, those people who are on the advocacy who don't cross over to speakers team, because a lot of them do, or who maybe don't cross over to the fraud team, how do we keep them more engaged? Is there more of a role as we switch now? As I said, we're still in special session at the legislation here in Minnesota, but at some point we think it'll stop. So could you talk a little bit more? You did talk some about how you keep them engaged, but maybe you could talk a little bit more about that.
Sure. I have a weekly advocacy call just for a half an hour. And so it's really top level of things that we're working on. And so we're also tracking the budget and these proposed cuts to Medicaid and what that would mean for the state legislative budget. And so asking our volunteers to also take action around the budget and write a letter to the governor. Write a letter to your members of Congress, write a letter, making them aware that AARP is tracking this. And especially the key message is, under Medicaid is that a lot of people associate Medicaid with young people, babies, infants, pregnant women, but they don't think about older adults. And so here in Washington State, we have a heavy reliance on Medicaid in our marketplace. And so it's called Apple Health. So a lot of people don't realize that they receive insurance called Apple Health that they're paying for, but it's also subsidized by Medicaid. And they don't also, we have 60% of our long-term care is home and community-based services. And people don't realize that that is also funded by Medicaid. And so the impact for older adults. So we're continuing during the session to keep them aware during these weekly calls. And then, some pick and choose. We don't require it. We send out a follow-up email to the broader volunteer group. And then we also look for opportunities during kind of this interim period to look at bills that didn't quite make it through. Like our crypto bill did not make it through because the tech industry came down and said, we need crypto ATMs. And so we are thinking through a strategy. And so a lot of our volunteers have friends or family or kids that work in the tech sector, and start talking to them. Here's the communication. This is why these crypto ATMs are problematic. We're not asking for elimination. We're asking for regulation. And so giving them some easy tasks to do and to realize that this is all advocacy. And we're not counting it necessarily, but it's also getting people engaged and involved in this issue, because then I get an email saying, hey, what's helping, with that crypto bill? Who else is involved? And, so I'm giving an update, like the city of Spokane wants to do a whole ordinance to ban these completely. And so it just keeps people connected, and it's my job to be a conduit and a connector. And so raising the issues, raising what's happening and going on currently, and then how they could potentially get involved. And then also thinking through, if there are, for example, there's a roundtable on housing that one of our members of Congress, I'm like, come sit in the audience, listen to, if you're really interested in housing, you're more than welcome to come. We're going to have, there's other opportunities for engagement, but we just make sure that there's just a really wide range of people to be able to, use their voice. Also, I get emails from our volunteers saying, I saw an article in the Seattle Times. I'm really frustrated that they didn't say anything about older adults. I'm like, write a letter to the editor. Let me help you. Here's the word count. Here's the address. I'll help you ghostwrite it. And so helping put that kind of what they see out in the community, because that's the most important role for me that volunteers play, is that they're the eyes and ears out in their local community, and they're, going to town halls that legislators are hosting, and I might give them a question if they want to feel comfortable asking a question, or maybe they just come back to me and report what they're hearing and seeing. But again, we're a small team, but it gives those volunteers this opportunity to really help us stay engaged and involved in the community.
That's awesome. Thank you. That's a lot of great ideas. I appreciate that.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy, for the information, and thank you, Joe, for asking the question. We had another person who wanted to speak. Ashley, didn't you have your hand
there.
up? Hi.
Good to be here. I am Ashley Ford. I am an Associate State Director with AARP Texas, and I'm based here in the state capital of Austin. And with my role, I am just focused on state and federal advocacy volunteers, and engaging people who are very excited to, try to, help big statewide policy or federal policy, which is often things like, caregiving and social security related advocacy. Texas is unique. I mean, my position is unique, I believe, but also Texas is unique because our state legislator only meets for 140 days every other year. And the only bill that they have to pass is the state budget. And so we just had wrapped up our legislative session. So it just ended earlier this month, and so it began in January. And I have been with AARP Texas since July of last year. And so I am still trying to come up with sort of a, figure out where I'm going and what I'm doing and who I'm doing it with and how to do it and all that good stuff, I guess. And I have just been incredibly inspired and encouraged by working with our state and federal advocacy volunteers, and that also includes like our executive council. And so I guess I'm just really excited to sort of be a part and hear the conversation, because I think that so much of what my focus is on is really on communities that are like not what we would consider Dallas or Houston or San Antonio. They are, like these rural pockets, ideally of the state, that are also very, red pockets of the state, and also considerably aging pockets of the state that, we don't have access to healthcare, access to, personal attendance and assistance and the like. And so I think that it's a really unique opportunity, but it's also, we have to be very strategic in these times of cutbacks and everything. And so just hearing from you guys is awesome. I wanted to just, I feel like I'm taking a lot, but I wanted to provide this or try to give this. I hosted our advocacy. I renamed our boot camp Advocacy U because I thought that sounded a little bit better. And so we're calling it Advocacy U, like Advocacy University. And I created a crest that is very Texas specific, that is scholarly, and sort of reiterating some of the, tenets and values of AARP, including one of the, symbols integrated is like a chicken coop, sort of, reflecting back on our founding and Ethel. And so, we had a graduation ceremony at the completion of, going through Advocacy U, which was a full day of sort of just really focused on state legislative work and, the committee chairs and the process and what, the three main priority pieces of legislation we were asking advocacy volunteers to be a part of. And so anyways, I think that sort of branding it of Advocacy U and we had pomp and circumstance playing and diplomas given and everything at the end. It energized everyone and definitely kind of created some sense of camaraderie against everyone. And, it's like the class of 2025. Advocacy. Our tagline was major in change. And so everyone there was to major in change. So anyways, I hope that y'all, and I'm happy to share some of the collateral that was created for that. And I really try to facilitate it using a SharePoint site too. So that's live and I'm kind of happy to share a link to that too if it piques your interest. So thanks for having me here, guys, and good to see your faces.
Well, Ashley, thank you for such an interesting approach. And I'm sure there have been others along the way. I'm so glad that you're willing to share. Yes, collateral materials, we're always looking for that because we put it out on the portal so people can get it, staff and volunteers. Thank you very much for doing it. You'll send it to me. We'll make sure it gets out there for people. Thank you. Okay, Dr. Mary, did you have anything else?
Well, I just want to say thank you to everyone for your contribution to this very lively, very informative, and very rich conversation. You may want to just save the chat, although Deborah is going to include it, on the portal, but there's some really good things in there. Mary Roberge mentioned about the what Vermont is doing about legislating for the crypto ATM. So, and then somebody right above her, who is that JR, mentioned some things, and then Barb. So if you want to just read those things, save it so you can have that, but we'll make sure you get that. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming and sharing your time, your expertise with us. This was meaningful in so many ways, and I hope that you got more than you expected, like I did, because I didn't even know what to expect of this conversation. We asked one question. Deborah had a whole chunk of questions and I had some more, but you see, sometimes it just takes one question and that gets the conversation going because you have so much to contribute. So I just want to say thank you all. Be safe. Enjoy life and each other. AARP is what connects us all, and I am just so grateful for the day that I became an AARP volunteer so that I had the opportunity to cross paths with each of you. Although it's virtually, I have seen some of you in person, but this has just enhanced my life in ways that I cannot even explain. So thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And our topic for next month is increasing volunteer-led events. So thank you very much.
And I'll put in the chat, Deborah, some of the things that you have upcoming, so that if somebody wants to save the chat, you'll have those things too.
Okay.
because I know
Thank
we're at time.
Yeah, we're at time and we don't run over. Thank you very much. I appreciate everyone coming today. Have a great rest of your week. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
See you in July.
And you can stop the recording.
Yes. Okay. Thank you very much for reminding me.